Hey guys, welcome back to the Compass Games Learn to Play series. Today we welcome designer Christopher Muller, who is going to walk us through his latest release, Brothers at War 1862. This is the first in a planned series of tactical ACW war games that explores command at the brigade level. These are fast, fun-to-play war games that provide interesting challenges for tactical level fans. So without further ado, over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Mo. Okay, so I'm going to choose to use the Battle of South Mountain, Fox's Gap, as the introduction. This is the one that I sort of recommend people use when they're learning the game. There's just a few units. This is the morning, the Scenario 5, called Garland's Last Stand. And it'll give you a sense of the unit types that are in the game. It'll give you a sense of how to use off-board artillery here without overwhelming you with a ton of units. And then go on and play all the other ones. This is my second game. My first game was Napoleon's Eagles, which was a Napoleonic card game. This is my second game. It's a Civil War, brigade level, hex and counter game. I'm just starting work on the second volume to this, which is 1861. This is 4 battles from 1862. There's South Mountain, Battle of Fox's Gap. There's Antietam, which is the cornfield. The scale of this game is fairly zoomed in, so each of these hexes is 100 yards. So the maps themselves, for a big battle like Antietam, you're just going to get portions of it. For smaller battles like Fox's Gap, Mill Springs is another one in this box, and Valverde is the 4th battle. You're going to get the entire battle, but that's because they're smaller battles. So this system works well for small battles and portions of large battles. It's a chit pull game. So the way the chit pull works, you're going to have an activation track here. And what you're going to do is you're going to pull units out of a opaque container, and you're going to place them on this track like this. And that'll show you which formation is going to activate. And you're going to keep pulling them. They'll go down this track. And when they land on these spaces here with a little watch, one of these watches here is going to go off and into the cup, into the opaque container. The turn ends when 2 of those clocks get pulled out of the cup. This white one is always going to start in the cup. That starts at the beginning. And then these tan colored ones just get in every time you add a clock. So until you start adding them, the turn literally can't end. This one, when a unit is spaced on one of these spaces here, that means draw a card. Both players are going to have a hand of cards, battle cards they're called. There's a variety of uses. They're not used to drive the game like a card-driven game, but they're used to give you little benefits, like you can increase your firepower, you can gain a movement point, that sort of thing. So let's just go ahead and start playing. This is the setup for Fox's Gap. You can see Scammon has his brigade here. Scammon is a member of Jacob Cox's division. This is his off-map display. You can see here he is, Eliakim Scammon, 1st Brigade. There's a leader, which is right here. He's not the actual leader. It's not an actual guy running around on his horse. He basically represents the center of mass of his brigade. So as long as a unit is within a regiment is within 4 hexes of him, that regiment is in command and can move normally. If they go zooming off outside of that range, outside of 4 hexes, they have to roll for command. He's not killable. You can't kill Scammon. There's no rules for that. Doesn't mean that leaders weren't killed in the Civil War, obviously, but since he doesn't represent a guy, there's no rules for him dying. He just moves around. At the end of your activation, you can move him kind of to wherever you want to put your brigade in command. There's skirmishers that can be deployed off of units, and until they're deployed, they stay on this brigade display over here. And then brigades also have reserves, which is a marker that moves along this track. When a regiment takes hits, you can spend a reserve to prevent them from dying. When it gets to the end of this track, it's flipped over and the brigade is exhausted, and bad things can start to happen at that point. Essentially, if the unit fails a fate check, it's called, the unit will break and be removed from the map. So that's, you don't want to get exhausted if you can help it. And then these dark spaces here, when regiments are actually physically eliminated, when you don't spend a reserve to save one, a casualty marker gets placed in each of these spaces. When both of these dark gray spaces have casualty markers in them, the brigade also breaks. So you have to balance, are you going to spend reserves? Are you going to eliminate units? And how are you going to do, how are you going to spend them to prevent your brigade from breaking if possible? You can also, if your skirmisher's here, you can flip him over. Here we go. Flip him over and he becomes a casualty as well. That you can spend him like a reserve if he's here. If he's out on the map doing his skirmish thing, you can't spend him as a reserve. If you've pulled him back and made him into a line troop, then he can be spent as a reserve. All right. So when you're playing a game of Brothers at War, turn is pretty straightforward. The turns are 20 minutes long. So this first scenario goes until from 9 in the morning till 11:40 in the morning on September 14th, 1862. Basically, a turn ends when those two clocks get pulled from the chit pull. The turn would end. You'd start a new turn. All the chits would go back in the cup. When you get to 10 o'clock here, these are reinforcements. So Crook's Union Brigade is going to come in from the south along with Glassy's Kentucky artillery. And then at 11:20 p.m., G.B. Anderson will come in as Confederate reinforcements. So really, for the first 4 turns, you're really just fighting with 2 brigades, Confederate brigades against 1 Union brigade. Confederate brigades are Rosser's cavalry, just a small cavalry regiment, sort of detached from Jeb Stuart's cavalry. And then this is Garland's, mostly North Carolina troops brigade. This right here, Bondurant's artillery, you can see it doesn't have a colored stripe. So Rosser's units have a green stripe. Garland's units have a white stripe. And then this is divisional artillery. So these guys don't activate until one of these is pulled. CSA activation marker is pulled. And when that happens, Bondurant's guns here are eligible to fire. Pelham's guns are not eligible to fire because they activate with Rosser. They're actually in his brigade. This is a divisional artillery. And then if you look over here, Turner's Gap, there's an off-board artillery card. This game has off-board artillery in some of the battles. Lane's Georgian Battery is over on Turner's Gap, which is sort of across the valley from the fight that we're doing here. And he's going to be able to fire onto the map using this fire point down here, Turner's Gap, 11 hexes. So basically, he just fires like a normal gun. This number down here next to his firepower, the numbers on the unit are firepower and movement. And then artillery has a special extra rating, which is range. So the number in the circle is his range. He has a range of 10. Turner's Gap here is 11. So that's outside of his printed range. So when you're out to double your printed range, you're firing at long range, which I'll get into when that happens. And then out to triple that, you're firing at extended range. And I'll get into that too. You can see the Union have some off-board artillery here. They can fire at Turner's Gap. They can do counter battery fire. It says down here who they can fire at. 24 hexes to Turner's Gap off-map artillery card. So they can fire at Turner's Gap only. The Turner's Gap guy can fire 11 hexes to the South Mountain map, or 24 hexes if they want to shoot at the guns down in Bolivar. They have that option as well. So let's just go ahead and start. So the first thing you do is you're going to pull a counter out and put it on the activation track. Here, Murray, this activation track. These come out of an opaque container. So we're going to pull this guy, and that's scamming. So we have the Union moving first. So that's the 23rd Ohio up here, 30th Ohio, and the 12th Ohio down here. This Union artillery only gets activated when the Union divisional artillery marker is pulled. If you look at the Union guys here, they have 2 sides. This is their unformed side. So if for infantry, these are all infantry regiments. So if this guy wants to go into the woods, he has to be unformed. You can't go into the woods if you're formed. And formed is the other side. So when you see a solid bar like that, see Garland's guys, these are all formed units. The 23rd Ohio can't be formed because he's in the woods. So he's going to be unformed. Unformed has 1 less firepower point. You can see that. He goes from a 6 to a 5. His movement remains the same, but he's going to pay different movement points moving through different terrain. And again, like I said, to go into woods, you have to be unformed to start. So let's start with the 30th Ohio over here. The 30th Ohio is also unformed, When you're unformed, you don't have to pay anything for walls or fences. This is a fence up here. This is a stone wall. For a regiment to cross a stone wall when it's formed costs it a movement point. Unformed doesn't. So this gentleman is going to cross here for 1. They're all in command. I checked, they're all within 4 of Scammon, so they're all in command. They don't have to roll for command. That's 1, 2, and then 3 to go up this hill. This is a elevation. There's a little diagram up here that shows level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So he just went from level 2 to level 3, so that costs him an extra movement point. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He can't get up to the top of the hill, so he'll just stay where he is there. When a unit is done moving, it gets marked with a finish marker. That's a finish marker. It just shows that he's acted. That stays on him until the Scammon's next activation marker is pulled from the cup. So they don't clear at the beginning of the turn or any other time. They just clear when their activation marker is pulled. Let's see. So the 12th Ohio, he's going to deploy a skirmisher. So the way that works is if a regiment wants to deploy a skirmisher, it costs its entire movement to do that. So he's going to do that. That's going to finish him. So he's done. And the skirmisher goes into his space. So he's just deployed that skirmisher, and now that skirmisher is now activated to move. Skirmishers have a lot of kind of unique abilities and limitations. They represent basically a company or a battalion of units. Every infantry brigade has 1 skirmisher they can deploy for the whole brigade. One thing they can do is they can move terrain for no additional cost. So he's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's going to push his skirmishers up to there. Those guys are also finished now because they've spent their 4 movement points. Units move 1 at a time. They spend their movement points to do actions. So, for example, to move into a new hex costs you 1. If you're moving up a hill, it costs you 2. To fire costs you 2, at which point you then become finished, even if you have movement points left. To assault, you can move into an enemy guy's hex. That costs you whatever the cost is to enter that hex. And after that's done, you're finished. You can change formation for 2. So this 23rd Ohio could form, let's say, for 2. He can't do it in the woods, but normally you can do it for 2. So those are all sort of different options that units have. So the 23rd Ohio is going to advance. He's going to go down this hill. So he's going down that hill. Doesn't cost you anything to go downhill. And into the woods costs him 2. So this brings up something else that you can do, which is opportunity fire. Pelham's artillery here has line of sight to this adjacent hex, so he can fire at him. He's also not marked with a finish marker. That's crucial. If you're marked finish, you can't opportunity fire. 5th Virginia can't see 23rd Ohio because Pelham blocks here and the woods block here. Same's true for all these other units. So really the only guy who could affect the 23rd Ohio is the Pelham's Virginians. So we're going to go ahead and have him fire. So he's going to opportunity fire. So he tells 23rd Ohio, "Hey, stop right there. I'm going to take a shot at you." He's going to be finished. And he's going to fire his firepower. 1 dice. It's there on the left. He's within his normal range of 6. So he's not penalized for being at long range. He also gets a benefit. There is a card. It's over here. I don't know why it's sideways, but this is the artillery ranges. So effective range, which is this band right here, this brown effective, is his printed range rating. There's no modifiers. At close, 0 to 3 hexes, he gets +1 firepower. So he's going to get +1 firepower here. So his firepower of 1 goes to a 2 at close range. That basically represents canister. And anything out to 3 is musket range in this game. All infantry can fire 3. Skirmishers can fire 3. And guns that are firing at 3 get a bonus. So we're going to roll 2 dice because of the close. And in this game, you're always rolling 6-sided dice, and you're always looking for 5s. There are some situations where a unit will say it has +1 to hit. So in that case, you're still looking for a 5, but you have a +1. So if you roll a 4, 4 + 1 is a 5, that becomes a success. So 1 to 4 is a failure. 5 to 6 is a success. So Pelham's going to roll 2 dice. I'm not going to roll here. I'll just say he rolls a 4 and a 5. So he's going to hit once. So when that happens, you record the number of successes. He had 1 success. The 23rd Ohio now gets to roll saves, and saves are on the other side of this artillery card. So you can kind of look at this card and just go down it and say, and figure out what your saves are. So did the attacker move? So Pelham's Virginia is the attacker in this case. He's the one firing. He did not move, so there's no saves for that. Range is the attacker far away. That doesn't affect artillery range, just affects infantry fire. The way it works for infantry fire is infantry can fire 3 hexes. Every intervening hex gives the defender 1 save dice. So if this guy were here and the 12th North Carolina were firing at him, he would get 1 dice because he's at long range. Essentially, he's 2 hexes away, so he gets 1 for that. Formation, he does get 1 for that. So unformed infantry always get 1 save simply because they're unformed. Terrain, woods gives you 1 save, so he's going to get 2 now, 1 for being unformed, 1 for terrain. And then he has the option, this game, unlike other games, retreating is not a combat result, at least not in fire combat. It's a choice. So you can choose to retreat 2 hexes, always 2 hexes, always going back towards rally points. These are the 2 rally points for the Union. And up here, there's 3 rally points for the Confederates. Every hex that you retreat has to bring you closer to the nearest rally point that is for your side. So 23rd Ohio is not going to run from this. So he's going to get 2 saves. So he gets 1 for his formation, 1 for his terrain. Rolls 2 dice. Let's say he rolls 1 5. That would be a save. So Pelham rolled 1 success. The 23rd Ohio rolls 1 save. Those hits cancel out, and the 23rd Ohio is basically survives that opportunity attack. The 23rd Ohio could assault with he spent 2, so he still has 2 more. So that would be 1 more to go into Pelham, and then he could assault Pelham. Or he could spend 2, it's cost you 2 to fire, to just fire from this hex. And he's going to do that. We'll just do that just for the sake of argument, because we've already done that with Pelham. So he's going to fire 5 dice. That's his firepower. So he's going to fire 5 dice. Let's say he does 2 hits to Pelham. He rolls 2 dice that are 5 or better. Pelham now has to roll saves. So we look at this card again. So in this case, the 23rd Ohio did move. So he's going to get 1 dice for that. Range, no. Formation, the guns don't get anything for deployed. That's a deployed gun. He doesn't get anything for that. Terrain, he's in the open. He doesn't get 1 for that. He's going to choose to retreat. So he's going to go back 2, 1, 2. When artillery repletes, they become limbered. So he flips over. That's what's on the back of a gun, is the limbered side. So he's going to get 2 saves. Let's say he saves none of them. 23rd Ohio, he's going to be finished. When you fire, you get marked with a finish marker. So now Pelham's Virginia is going to have to deal with 2 hits. So each hit that you don't roll a save against, you have to deal with. The first hit that you take, if you're formed infantry, you're going to become unformed. So the first hit on formed infantry causes them to become unformed. Other units that don't have a formed symbol, which is all artillery, all cavalry. This is a cavalry unit. You can see the cross sabers means he's a cavalry. He's mounted on this side. He's dismounted on this side. Those guys cannot unform to take a hit. Only formed infantry can do that. So Pelham's Virginia can't do that. So the first thing then he's going to do is he's going to become disrupted. Now he's disrupted. In the physical game, this disruption marker, which I can't seem to place off of him, is on the back of the finish marker. So you just flip the finished open marker, and that's his first hit. He's disrupted. So he takes a disruption. The second hit will eliminate him. If a disrupted unit takes a hit, it's eliminated. When a unit is eliminated, not when it's disrupted, but when it's eliminated, you have the option to save it. So Rosser can spend this reserve to save Pelham's Virginia from elimination. So that would be the next hit. That would move the reserve marker to here, and he would become exhausted. He doesn't really want to do that. So instead, here's a cavalry skirmisher here. He's going to be killed. So we're going to move him over here. So his skirmisher is now gone. It's dead. So he spends his skirmisher instead of spending a reserve, so he doesn't exhaust. But now he doesn't have the ability to generate skirmishers anymore. So that's how he dealt with his 2 hits. 23rd Ohio's done. So if we look at Scammon's brigade, everybody's marked finished. You don't have to be finished. You could just have a guy sit, and then he can opportunity fire if the enemy approaches. So, but because the Union's advancing, they're not going to do that. So they're all finished. The last thing you do on your turn is your activation is to move your leader. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that if he hangs out in this hex, he'll be able to keep everybody in command. Stacking in this game is 2 per hex, 2 regiments. So these two guys could stack in a hex together. They have to be from the same brigade, and they share the same state. So if one unit in a hex is finished and this guy moves in, he also becomes finished. A hex can't contain more than one of these markers. Can't hit. If you moved in and this guy was disrupted, he would become disrupted. So stacking is 2. You have to be from the same brigade. Leaders and skirmishers. Skirmishers can never stack. Well, they can't end their turn stacked, and leaders don't count for stacking, so they can stack for free. So that would be the end of that activation. We would go back to the activation track. We would pull the next marker, and it's Rosser. So the guy we just beat up on now gets to activate. So that's these guys. So when a formation activates, you check for command. Everybody's in command, so they don't have to roll. If the 50th Virginia had been finished, his finish marker would be removed. This is called the recovery step. This guy gets to roll to recovery. So he's disrupted. Remember, like I said, everything in the game requires a 5 or better to succeed. A 1 to 4 is a failure. So Pelham has to roll a 5 or 6 to try to remove his disruption marker. That means he recovers. He's adjacent to his brigade commander, so that gives him a +1 to that check. So he will check on a 4 better. Let's say he fails. If he succeeds, this will come off, and he's now ready to go. If he fails, he has the option to keep this disruption, and there is a reason for that. It lets you move. You just have to move away from anybody in line of sight. Or you can just flip to become finished. So then the next time he activates, he will just remove that. So you only ever have to roll for disruption once, and then you become finished, and the next time but for now, for this turn, he's basically unable to do anything because he starts finished. The 5th Virginia here has to decide what he wants to do. So he now can fire on the 23rd Ohio. So this is the line. I'm using the line of sight thing here. If you have a line of sight like this that goes along straight down a hex boundary, you have the option to decide which side of that you're tracing from. If he traces this way, he can't see because there's a woods in the way. But if he traces this way, it's open, so he can see the 23rd Ohio. So he could fire at him if he wants. I think instead what he's going to do is he's going to, we'll leave this guy disrupted. And I'll show you how this works. He's disrupted. He can move, but he can't move closer to any enemy that he has in his line of sight. So he's going to go down this hill for one because of the road. The road negates all movement penalties. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. He'll just go to there. And the 5th Virginia he's going to mount. That's a formation change. So he becomes mounted. Combat rating goes away, but he becomes movement 8. And he will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, and then he'll be done. So these guys are decided 23rd Ohio is scary. They're going to head off down the road, and Rosser can go join them. Rosser leaders, like I said, really can move infinitely. They just get placed during the leader movement phase. So since that's all that Rosser has, he's done. I'll talk about the victory conditions real quick. They're very simple for this scenario. The Union needs to control at the end of the game either the Wise House. Wise House is here, that hex, and the Hutzel Farm is here. That's the other one. So if the Union controls either of these settlements at the end of the game, they win. If they don't, the Confederate wins. So very straightforward. So we're also going to head over here and sort of screen the Hutzel farm just in case the Union tries to go make an end run that way. So they're done, and that's the end of the activation. So we have another chip pull. Okay, the USA Artillery comes out. They're going to, since they landed here, one of these is going to go in the cup. So I will go and put that in the cup. Now, it is now possible, again, once 2 clocks come out, the turn is over. But first, so the USA Artillery is going to go. The Divisional Artillery, we have Chrome's Ohio Battery down here, and we have the 2 Bolivar batteries off board over here. So they're all now activated to go. So if you look at Chrome's artillery, he's limbered. You can set up guys in whatever formation you want. I just happen to set them up limbered since they want to move. If we look at them, they have they're rifled guns, so they have a 9 range, and they're more than 9 hexes from the Wise House. So we want to get them to the Wise House. So we'll keep them limbered. There is something that they want to consider, which is there is going to be fire coming over here from Turner's Gap. And that fire is traced directly onto the board in these directions. So the way it works is off-bar artillery will trace to this hex for 11, and then 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So it'd be 16 hexes away, but line of sight gets traced in directly from the board edge. So right now, he's behind this woods, so he's blocked. So he wants to end up somewhere. These hexes right here are good hexes for him to end up in because line of sight from Turner's Gap is blocked into those hexes. As long as he stays here, 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 or here, Turner's Gap can't shoot at him. Here, there's trees here, but the trees are below. They're at level 1 and this is level 2, so they don't block. So all of these hexes here, he can be hit. Here he can be hit. Here he can be hit. But so I'm going to move him to 1, 2, and then he's going to deploy for his last 2. So there we go. He's done. He's going to be ready to fire next time he activates. Bolivar, these guys are going to fire at Turner's Gap. We have Benjamin, who has a range of 10, 2 dice, 2 firepower with a range of 10. And we have Gibson here, who has 3 dice firing at a range of 9. So again, if we look at this artillery card, it says 24 hexes to Turner's Gap. So both of these units are at triple range, extreme range, range times 3. At range times 3, you have a -1 to hit, so you only hit on 6s. And extreme range, you have a maximum of 1 hit you can do. So even if Gibson rolls 3 6s, he'll only do 1 hit to Lane's Georgians. All right, so we've got 3, and then we've got 2. So Gibson's going to fire. Say he gets 1 hit. He rolls a 6. He'll do 1 hit to Lane's Georgians. Lane's Georgians, they are at level 3 versus level 1. So they're actually higher than the Bolivar guns. So they're going to get 1 save for being at a higher elevation. They also just get +1 because they're essentially kind of hull down compared to these guys. So they get and they're in the woods or behind a fence or whatever. So they're going to get a benefit to that. So they're going to get 2 rolls when Bolivar fires at them. Let's say they roll nothing. That will disrupt Lane's Georgians. Then Benjamin could fire. Benjamin fires 2. Say he rolls 1. Let's say Lane doesn't roll 1. Lane would be eliminated. But if you're off board, you get 1 support. So like 1 reserve, kind of a free reserve that represents, support stuff that's around the gun up there. So he's now uses 1 support. If he got hit again, he'd be killed. He has no ability to spend support anymore at that point. That's all the firing. These guys are both finished. And we will go ahead and pull the next marker. So we'll go back to our activation track. Our next marker, and it's our first clock. So again, first clocks come out. When the second clock comes out, the turn's over. And this landed on a card space. So both players draw a card. I haven't gotten into the cards at this point. Cards are here's a couple cards. Here's double shotted. Here's the slows. These are cards. Players going to start each turn with 3 cards, and then you get more on the turn track as you go. You can see here what they do. So play when an artillery unit fires at close range. So Pelham's guns, when they fired at point blank range, they could have double shot it. He had 2 dice. The first 2 dice you roll are +2 to hit. You inflict 1 hit on the firing unit for each of those rolls that fails. Double shotting was dangerous. So you're going to roll 2 dice. They're going to have +2 to hit, which means they're going to hit on a 3 or better. But if you roll a 1 or a 2 on either of them, Pelham's guns are the ones that'll take the hit. Double shotting can be powerful and is a little dicey. So that's, a card you could play. The slows, play when a countdown or activation marker is pulled from the cup. So either player could say, you know what? I don't want this clock to come out. Put that back in the cup and draw again and give me a different one. So cards, do that sort of thing. I'm not going to get into them, but they're very pretty self-explanatory. Cards themselves will say when you can play them. So play after a brigade commander moves. So Scammon, when he moves, bloop, he moves, and then his effect happens. The cards will tell you when you can play them. When the clock comes out, it triggers the space that it's in, doesn't do anything else, and then you pull again. So we'll pull again, and we got Garland this time. So Garland is the CSA units here, this brigade. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody is very nicely in range here of Garland. So we can choose what we want to do. So the goal for the South, obviously, is to protect these towns. So they have, or houses, they're not really towns, they're just farmsteads. So the 20th and the 13th, they're over here protecting Wise House. These guys are protecting anybody from coming in on the flank. I was going to see if the 23rd could come over here and blaze away at the 30th Ohio. The problem is he's formed. So let's look at the movement for him to do that. It's going to be, if he wanted to move into the hex, it would be 1 to go up the hill. Because he's formed, it costs you 1 to cross the wall. So that's 2. And then 3 to get into the hex. And then to fire is 2 additional. So that would be 5. So he wouldn't be able to fire from there. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to use him to deploy a skirmisher. So he'll be finished. We'll go and get Garland skirmisher here. The Ellis Guards, 5th North Carolina Company C. So they're going to go in here. And again, that's his 1 skirmisher for Garland's corps. It's, it represents the entire brigade's skirmisher efforts. It's not actually the 5th North Carolina Company C. That's just a representative company from that brigade. This guy comes, he's activated. Skirmishers cannot move adjacent to enemy units. They can't stack and they can't move adjacent to enemy units. So he can't go here because he's now adjacent. An enemy unit moves adjacent to him, he disbands, but he can't voluntarily go. So he's going to go to here for 1. Neither of these units can fire at him because they're both finished. They have a finish marker on him. He's going to come up here for 1 because the skirmishers never pay terrain costs. He moves 1 up the hill, and then he's going to take a shot at the 30th Ohio. So that will finish him when he fires. Skirmishers have 2 dice, whatever their firepower is, but here it's 2. They can fire out to range 3 like normal, but the saves that the defending unit gets are pretty dramatically reduced. They don't get they don't get terrain saves, they don't get formation saves. The only saves they get are 1 if your unit moved and 1 if they retreat. And just like the guns at extreme range, they can only do a maximum of 1 hit, regardless of how many they roll. So we're going to roll 2 dice. Let's say we do get 2 successes, a 5 and a 6. Normally that would do 2 hits, but because it's a skirmisher, just does 1. So the 30th Ohio gets 1 save because this guy moved, and 1 if he falls back. He's going to go ahead and he's not scared. He's going to stay where he is. So he's going to roll his 1 dice. Let's say he fails. Because he's already unformed, he can't unform to take that hit. So he has to become disrupted. Oh yeah, that's right. All right, so 30th Ohio is now disrupted. This guy's done. So we move on to the next fellow, 5th North Carolina. There's something you can do. You can spend 3 points to hold fire, which means that you can move 1, and then spend 3 more to hold fire, which means you're not going to get a finish marker put on you. So he would be eligible for opportunity fire if somebody moves into his line of sight. That, and then the North Carolina unit, this 12th, will move to here. That costs him 1 to go over the wall, 2 to go here. He can't see the 23rd North Carolina because this wood's in the way. It's also an elevation that's in the way, so he can't see him. He can't fire. He could go 1 additional, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4. But I think that's more like a flank guard there. So he's going to stay there. These 2 guys, I think they're just going to hold fire. They're on defensive posture there, so they're good to go. This guy did move, so he is finished. And the 5th North Carolina is sitting here, and he's not finished. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 4. I think Garland's happy where he is. So that's going to end Garland's. No, Garland wants to go 1 closer to keep the skirmishers in command. 1, 2, 3, 4. But that'll put him out of command. If he goes to here. So you can see they're a little spread out. All right. Let's do this. The 3rd North Carolina will move into the Wise House and we'll stack. He'll go 1 and then he will hold fire, so he's not finished. So these guys are able to stay in this hex and remain ready in case somebody comes up this road. They can fire on them. So that'll be that. That ends Garland's activation. Do 1 more here. We will pull again. This is Scammon again. All right. So when you get your second activation, Scammon's activated once here on the first one, and he's activated again. Most units have 2 activation markers in the cup. That's sort of the default setting kind of for the guys. Scammon's back. We already counted everybody out. Everybody here is in command. Nobody retreated out of range. So all the finish markers are removed. This 30th Ohio has to check his disruption. He's not adjacent to Scammon, so he doesn't get that benefit. So he would need a 5 or 6. Let's say he rolls a 4. This he would just switch to a finished. So he can't actually fire or do anything, can't deploy skirmishers, can't do anything like that. But he's ready to rally later. 12th Ohio. Let's bring them up. So they're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then they'll be done. The skirmishers here, they could see the 5th North Carolina. They could do a little fighting against the skirmishers, but I think they're going to come up to here. That allows the 5th North Carolina to fire them if he wants, or Bondurant's artillery could also fire at them. Those guys are both ready. Let's go ahead and take a shot with take a shot with Bondurant. So Bondurant will fire 2 dice, 1, 2, 3. He gets a 3rd dice because he's at 3. 1, 2, 3. So he's going to fire 3 dice at Scammon. Let's say he rolls 2 hits. So we're going to check the saves. Bondurant who fired. So Bondurant did not move, so no saves for that. Range, again, guns don't give you any range benefit. They hit just as hard at close range as they do at long range. Formation, yes, skirmishers always get 1 save. Terrain, he's going to get 2 saves for the wall, and then 1 save as a hindrance for the cornfield. This is a cornfield. If the line of sight goes through a cornfield, if he was in the cornfield, you don't get it for just being in it. It has, if the line of sight goes through it, you get a benefit. So he's going to get 1 for his formation. He's going to get 2, 3 for the corn. He only gets the wall if he's directly behind the wall. So like these walls, the guns just sort of ignore them. It's just because he's precisely behind this wall that he gets the benefit. And then skirmishers can't retreat. So he's going to get, 1, 2, 3, 4 saves. He'll roll his dice. Let's assume he saved. I think he would probably save. Make his 1 dice. He could move again because he only spent one moving here. He could move to here. But he's going to take a shot at the 5th North Carolina, see if he can give him a finish marker or unform him or disrupt him. Well, I can't disrupt him, but unform him to make the 23rd Ohio give him a better shot at approaching without getting blasted. So he's going to fire 2, does 1 hit, let's say. Again, because these are skirmishers, the 5th North Carolina does not benefit from the wall, does not benefit from the corn. The skirmishers are kind of all around in a cloud out here taking pot shots. They're marksmen. They can only do 1 hit. So that's why the terrain is handled that way. It's not like the volley fire from a regiment. So he's going to do 1 hit. Garland's going to get 1 save because he moved. And he could get another save if he retreats. I don't think he wants to retreat. So he'll just take the 1. He'll roll 1. He fails. And he becomes unformed. This guy fired. He's finished. The reason he unformed is because he was formed to begin with. So now he just basically, when he unformed, he lost the firepower. That's the main issue. And he also sort of lost a hit point if he gets blasted by somebody. So we've moved all these guys. 23rd could stay where he is and just hold. He could go 1 and he could stay there and hold. 2, 3, 4. We'll do an assault. So he's going to go 1, 2, 3 to get up the hill. You ignore the wall if you're unformed. 4. So we'll just show you. I'll show you how an assault works. So that's an assault action. So we have 5 dice going against 2 dice. 5 dice need during an assault. What happens is you roll simultaneously, and there's no saves. Both sides are going to take whatever hits are inflicted. So you got to be careful when you come into assault. You want to try to disrupt the guy if you can. This is not an optimal assault. I would not recommend this. Even though there's 5 going against 2, that looks pretty good. This is a little regiment. 23rd Ohio is really big, but for a variety of reasons, this is not optimal. But anyway, so the 23rd Ohio is going to roll 5 dice, hitting on 5s. Because they're coming up a hill, they have a -1 to hit. So they're actually going to, the last hex that you came up was up a hill. So that's a -1. So they're actually only hitting on 6s. The 2nd North Carolina is going to roll 2 dice. They're hitting on 5s, but because they're formed in an assault, they get a +1 to hit. So 23rd Ohio is -1 for coming up this elevation. 12th North Carolina is +1 for being formed. So they're going to roll 2 dice, hitting on 4s or better. 23rd Ohio is going to roll 5 dice, but they only hit on 6s. They'll roll, let's say that the 23rd Ohio does 2 hits and the North Carolina also does 2 hits. If the number of hits inflicted are the same, the 23rd Ohio, the attacker, has to retreat 2 hexes. So he's going to go 1 here and 1 here. This is not a good hex to retreat into, but he has to because that's closer to his rally point. And this is not closer to his rally point. So he's got to go here. If you retreat adjacent to an enemy unit, you're going to take an additional hit. So he's already taken 2. This would be 3, and then he would go to here. 3 hits are going to be, because he's unformed, the first hit's going to be disruption. And then he's got 2 more hits. So let's pull in Scammond's brigade here. 2 hits. That's going to be 1, 2. So they're not exhausted yet, but they just took that was a bad hit. So they'll do that. 23rd Ohio survives. They've taken their 3 hits. They're done. Now, 12th North Carolina takes 2 hits. They don't have to retreat because they drove back to 23rd Ohio because they did equal hits or more. So first hit is going to unform him. And the second hit is going to disrupt him. So that's going to be, he's going to be in that hex disrupted. So Scammond's guys are all done. They've all done something. Scammond could move to here. The skirmishers. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's still within range of him, and he'll be able to give him a benefit the next time he needs to do his recovery check at his +1. So that's the end of Scammond's activation. So let's say we're done with that. We're going to pull the next one, and we pull a clock. So that's our second clock. We pulled 2 now. So the turn ends at this point. We look in the cup to see what counters are left in the cup. And what's left in the cup are these. So we have 2 CSA artillery, one USA Artillery, one Rosser, and one Garland. That's what's all left in the cup at the end. So the only formation that has both of its activations in the cup was the CSA Divisional Artillery. Those guns, they are called an inactive brigade. They're inactive for this entire turn. You get a little benefit when you're inactive. The first one is you recover. So this Bondurant's gun here will clear its marker. And the gun up on the hill can roll. Let's say he rolls and he makes it. So he'll become finished. Everybody else activate at least once so they don't get a benefit. This goes back here. All of these markers then are going to go back into the cup for the next turn. And we go up here. We advance the turn marker. We look to see if there's any reinforcements. There's none of them for turn 2. If turn 10, we would take Crook. I'm sorry, not turn. If it was turn 4, 10 o'clock a.m., Crook's 2 activation markers here would go in the cup. And when they pull, he would enter. When they get pulled, he would enter on the hexes that are shown on here. So it says Crook comes in at 0009 or 1010. Glassy, same thing. Those hexes are down here. When they become available, you just put them down here near these hexes. And then when their marker is pulled, these guys would be obviously limbered. And you can bring these units in whatever formation you want, formed or unformed. And there's your commander. So when their marker gets pulled, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4. You can bring their whole formation in. That's pretty much the game mechanics in a nutshell. There are a number of wrinkles. For example, if the 30th Ohio came within range here, these 2 guys can do combined fire, it's called. You have to be formed infantry or artillery. So 2 artillery could also do this, or 2 formed infantry. The infantry can be in adjacent hexes. So both of these guys could do combined fire or be in the same hex. So those guys could do combined fire. You can also do combined fire on the attack. So if these guys were both formed, you could also say, okay, these 2 guys are going to fire combined arms into here. That you have 9 dice now. You get to add their 2 dice together. So you're throwing 9 dice into Wise House. Or if these guys are moving, they could move to here, and then the 20th and 13th could fire 5 dice at them using combined fire that way. So there's a number of wrinkles like that. Skirmishers have some extra abilities, have something called a skirmish zone, which prevents the opponent from firing through the hexes exerted by the skirmisher. So if this guy's here, let's say he's here, move all this, and there's skirmishers here. The 5th North Carolina, he's within range of the 23rd, but he can't fire through the skirmish zone of the skirmishers. Let's say the skirmishers were here. Normally he would line of sight, but the skirmish zone, every hex around the skirmishers is a skirmish zone. Infantry can't fire through that zone. They'd have to get rid of the skirmishers first. So he'd fire at the skirmishers, boom, they got rid of, then this guy up here could then fire at him. So skirmishers are able to screen the troops of their own brigade. So there's a number of little wrinkles like that, but that's a good overview of the mechanics of Brothers at War.